So, normally I use today for contemplation, writing, and games, although which I still am as opposed to making a video, but in this case, given what just dropped on Peacock, after 4 months, they always wait a full month longer than the 90 days that Netflix, Prime, or others do, who stream something. I'll make a section. Now that I've finally seen it, it is definitely not the best live action version of an animated work I've seen, but it is also thankfully far from the disaster I envisioned, and as I'm often glad to be relieved about. So, let's talk about this year's live action reversion of Dreamworks How to Train Your Dragon and how it is certainly a live action movie that exists. Let's begin. Anyway, before I get into this version, I thought I would also give my own personal data whenever I talk about a reversioning of a previous work whenever possible. I mean, especially given how overwhelming and it is doing this after 15 years. Seems like only yesterday, but I guess it is like a perspective thing. That in mind, I was on a class trip staying in Portland where there was like a theater nearby where I was staying conveniently enough. I mean, couldn't get into another movie I wanted to see, and even though Dragons have been key parts of other fantasy franchises, is their track record as being like the main point of a movie was much more scattered, so I was certainly skeptical. However, her as I saw the movie, even paying a little bit extra to type on a 3D screening, I was thankfully proven wrong. I mean, even though the marketing may look like otherwise, this actually proved to be quite the engaging fantasy film, even kicking off what I consider to be a DreamWorks best trilogy, given how I have all of them on Blu-ray. I tear my hands, and I saw the first and third one in theaters. I wanted to see the second, but I couldn't. I mean, and out of all the potential choices they could have gone with as their first kind of live action version, this is the one that made the most sense. Hence, as did bringing back Dean Dubois, who I'm just going to be calling Dean for consistency. He to helm this one, given how he co-wrote and directed the first film and was the sole writer and director of the sequels. Mean, admittedly, the skepticism here arose from a different part because of my love for this of the original animated trilogy. He, and apart from the obvious, I want a piece of the market of their rivals. It did leave me a little scratching heads and confusion, given how many of their anime works have been highly acclaimed, successful, or both up to this point. I mean, as in, why horn in on a much riskier, more crowded market when the current plan is working fine? But, despite all this, and why I ultimately chose not to go initially, hey, the film ended up becoming the most successful Dragons movie by a landslide, which has, as of this recording, he banked $262 million domestically and $635 million worldwide, which is definitely a respectable amount, I would say, given how some of their rivals like Aladdin, Lion King, and Stitch have joined the $1 billion worldwide club, with others making respectable nine-figure amounts. So, and before I get into all the foofara on this version's story and characterization, I'm going to use this transition to the good points I found with the new one. So let's start with those. First off, the most obvious is is being the fact that I'm glad they kept like the designs of the dragons intact, and they only made them look slightly more realistic, like with stuff like how their eyes and how their skin are rendered. I mean, it's still recognizable for what we're looking at. You can tell right away that's a Night Fury, that's a Broncle, and that is certainly the Red Death as was called in the original movie. And I consider the Detective Pikachu comparisons a compliment in the sense that it looks enough realistic enough for film, which is obviously a different discipline than doing animated. So again, I'm glad a lot of them are reaching a stage where sometimes it's best not to fix designs that aren't broken, and and I also admittedly like all the location they use in Belfast, which is standing in for the fictional Isle of Burke. I mean, and even though I was not sure what to make of the casting at first, I am glad they brought back Gerard Butler as Stoic, who has done both Everyman and more superhuman kind of action works, and he has children of his own, so it's not a total stretch he'll be doing this, man. As I also do not mind seeing Nick Frost as the live action variant of Gobber. Her, I think he'll do just fine as a new Hagrid. I will definitely deal with everything else surrounding that HBO event as it comes. Um, I also think that the people they've hired for the new live action variants of the younger characters, they seem like nice kids. Especially in the case of Mason Thames as Hiccup and Nico Parker as Astrid. I mean, this time around, the relationship seems more professional and less openly romantic than. And the conflict is rooted in a different source than it was in the original movie. He, where it's clear that even though they don't always get treated well, Hiccup does have quite the advantage with his dad being a chieftain, and she hasn't even seen her actual parents in ages. It's not even clear whether or not they're even still alive. I didn't even mind the colorblind casting of the other characters because it made sense for a story that it's war, dang it, you need all the help you can get. I mean, they also go off the implication that Burke is one of multiple bases of operation they've got, they're trying to maintain. And I even have had to, of like other supporting teams, I had to say I feel like Julian Dennison as Fish Legs. Even though I personally would have gone for, say, Archie Yates from Jojo Rabbit in that role. I have liked Dennison in other films I've seen of him, both smaller productions and bigger budget effects of temples. Especially, I mean, definitely captures the vibe of a lot of them being he and Hiccup being eccentric but intelligent and youngsters being, and even like the elder from the other movie who ends up foreseeing everything still proves to be something on Salvador course. I mean, doesn't talk much, but the body language is quite expressive in any version, especially like the hat she wears. And before I get into the aspects I have more mixed feelings on, if anyone asks if this was because of a Dragons Isle of Berg expansion to Universal Orlando as part of the Epic Universe, well, given how this movie and the park were likely starting development and having the finishing touches put up at roughly around the same time, I'll just chalk that up to good timing. Much like how they added the Dongyun Country expansion Super Nintendo World, same year as I get a new 3D DK game and remaster of a title that people played and enjoyed in years past, or the fact that they're expanding more Wizarding World stuff after making more progress on that eventually has been dragging off the ground for a while. Again, just deal with that last one as it comes. Now I will address the stuff that kept the same, and apart from some shots being framed differently or some lines of dialogue being worded differently, and even with Dean's claims otherwise in interviews and statements online, much of the film is, in fact, that's very close to the original from 2010. To a point where some people even compared it to like the 1988 Gus Van Sant versus Psycho, which, oof, that's harsh. Warranted to an extent to be sure, but still harsh. And I will at least admit that again, the changes they do make a bit more sense than Vince Vaughn doing something inappropriate through the peephole of a hotel door. Or I mean, because while some people pointed out that the whole sneezing in a terrible terror's mouth meant like the whole way that he they figured out how to stop the Red Death was shown differently. And to be fair, that I can understand that, but I actually noticed that was actually applied to the Zippelback instead, it, with instead going into the mouth that ignites the gas opposed to one that emits it. And even like the sparking they had in that head kind of reminded me of that Godzilla figurine used to have. Wonder what happened to it though. And admittedly, the pacing does drag at times, and others it goes by a bit too fast. But I've seen other films with similar, if not longer running times. So I wasn't too bothered by it. People have also compared this to like a PG version of Song of Ice and Fire, and I kind of get where they're coming from. Certainly not in terms of other people being courted. And don't worry, nothing gets so bad that they had to enable prima nocta. And I apologize for how dark that implication but the it's definitely they do their best to really lean hard into like the war aspect. To mean like the boat attack was only just hinted at in the original movie, gets spanned a full sequence here, and it is admittedly one of the more frightening scenes. And even though the original trilogy definitely is one of the darker storylines, like not completely without humor, but really leans hard on like the whole fantasy aspects of it's even the ending was largely left intact. Even if some of the reactions again aren't exactly the same. Um, and as for the potential sequel currently on track for 2027, Dean was interested in bringing back Kate Blanchett's Valka, Hiccup's mother. I am actually okay with that. In fact, as long as we're on that, I would actually not object to bringing back Jimon Hunsa as Bloodfist either, and some people were concerned about his portrayal in the original movie in 2014. This could be a way to address that as well. Hell, especially since he is key to the overall story arc, being responsible for what happened and when Hiccup was just an infant, and that's why he has like that scar on his chin, and 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 even the whole story arc of Hiccup being in training being the chieftain for the moment when Stark is gone. On he obviously wants peace, but he knows he still has to prepare for war, or should it come to that, and it did. All in all, I'm actually quite glad that I did not go to this theatrically and waited for it to come home, and as this discourse continues, who's when Pixar was asked about the prospect of remaking the animated films in live action, and a lot of the people in charge of the studio, and Pete Docter in particular, said was the effect of absolutely not. I'm not saying it would be impossible to do things in live action, and like the Sonos fan remakes of the Toy Story films in live action are pretty cute. It's I'm just saying that it would be really different seeing in stuff like Element City, Hitty, the Communiverse, or Riley's Mind's Eye that way. Hey, personally, hey, even if some of the cosplays I've seen have been quite impressive, have mean, have mean, and so this is not the best or the worst live action version I've ever seen. And I would probably say it's the most average one I've ever seen. And especially since I was watching it at the same time I had the original on my computer just to verify I, what was going on. It actually syncs up a few times. So I'd say a solid 3 out of 5 stars, 2 out of 4 stars, and in all honesty, if I was given the choice of which one I would watch again and more frequently out of the ones coming in the summertime, I'd honestly watch the new Stitch again because even with all the foo-foo around that I would rather a remake that has the a temerity to at least try to change something, even if it's not always going to be well received universally, as opposed to someone who tries to barely change anything at all. Oh, to be perfectly frank, I mean, since, but if you saw this theatrically or planning on watching this at home, I'm not gonna hold it against you. And given how there's more and more stuff leaking about not just the game I'm expecting on Thursday, but also what's coming, as far away as 2030, so we worked that in my 5 year plan. And and doing this and other videos got mine will help me keep my mind off the leaks. So that'll be all for now. So take care, everyone. Hmm.